In this video, let's talk about speaking better English. If you are learning English, then you probably want to speak it at some point. It can be difficult, but there are many ways to improve your speaking skills. Are you ready to learn 7 tips that can help you improve your speaking in English? If so, then let's get into it. How you use a language is much more important than how it sounds. And I think understanding is more important. If you can use English well enough that the person that you're speaking to can understand you, then I think that you're doing okay. The main point of a conversation is to have 2 people that can understand each other. And you can always get better at pronunciation once you get better at speaking in general. If you are getting confused looks, then you may want to start thinking about how I can improve my pronunciation. But other than that, especially at the beginning, start thinking about how you use the language and not necessarily how it sounds. Here, I think focusing on intonation is going to be a little more helpful than just thinking of pronunciation. If you can get intonation down, then you're going to probably be able to pick up on more specific pronunciation points later on down the line. So don't make pronunciation the main thing that you want to work on. I have spoken to many people with different levels of pronunciation, and as long as they're able to express themselves well enough that we can have a conversation and I can understand them, then we're gonna be okay. So just don't make it your main focus. Knowing vocabulary is important because every language uses words. Without words, we won't ever have a chance of having any type of good conversation. Everything that you do in English will consist of words. Knowing how they connect with words and knowing certain base words is going to help you be able to pick up on more complex vocabulary. The more that you expose yourself to different types of words, the better it's going to be when you need to reach back and then pick out the word that you need for that specific conversation. You don't have to memorize lists of words, but the more words that you know, it's going to be better for you in general when it comes to getting better and better at English conversation. Once you are able to start to predict what's happening in a conversation, you're going to be better at speaking because you're going to have a response for any situation that you're put in. This can only happen when you focus on exposing yourself to lots and lots of vocabulary. When I first got to Japan, I only had a limited pool of words to choose from, and you can really tell when it came to a conversation, I wouldn't know what to say. I might start to understand what the other person was saying to me, but I just had no words to pull from. The more words that I learned, the better it was for me. I started to become more comfortable in conversations. So really focus on exposing yourself and building up your words, getting that vocabulary expanded, and you're gonna be better off in the long run. Don't focus on things that bring you stress when you're trying to speak English. Things like memorizing complicated grammar points or grammar rules can just make it more difficult for you to speak, because instead of focusing on speaking and naturally having that conversation flow, you're going to be trying to fit what you have into the box of that rule that you're thinking about. And just like before with the words, the more exposure that you have to various types of conversations, various types of situations, the easier it's going to be to predict what's going to come next so that you can have a more fluid, fluent, natural conversation. When you get to the point that you're able to correctly guess what's going to happen next in that conversation, you will naturally be putting grammar together at this point. Especially at the beginning, the more words that you know, the more exposure that you have to certain types of situations, the easier it's going to be for you to start to put things together in a natural, grammatical way. You shouldn't be thinking of English as a problem that you have to solve. I have lots of students who ask me, should my voice be rising or falling here? Should I use this tense or that tense in this situation? But what they're not doing is just naturally using what they already know or what they have already learned before. With time and more conversations, you're going to naturally be able to pick up on grammar by that specific situation that you're putting yourself in. So don't focus on all the little details, just focus on how I can speak more comfortably and more naturally. Don't think of grammar as a strict set of rules. Grammar can be thought of as a usage guide for English. And just like everything, it changes over time. The way that I use English now is even very different from the way that I would use it when I was just a little boy. You will also find that the grammar points that you may find in a book are not necessarily used by real people either. I don't see words like whom being used very often now, but when I was a boy, this is the way that we were taught to start a formal letter, to whom it may concern. The way that we use English is always changing and growing, and I'm sure it's the same in your native language as well. When you are comfortable with the language, you're able to grow and adapt with that language, and you should be able to do the same thing in English as well. So get used to the language and the way that it's changing and growing, and it's probably going to do you better in the long run than just memorizing strict grammar rules and then trying to fit what you want to say into that set box of grammar. Speaking of usage patterns, the good thing is that there is a limit to how many patterns that you can use. I'm sure that no matter what language that you speak, there's certain patterns that you use more often than others. Depending on the situation, you're probably using similar patterns with different variations. If you think of this in terms of vocabulary that we talked about before, there are so many different words, so many vocabulary that you're gonna have to learn if you were to know everything, and there is no person in the world that knows every word and what it means. Native speakers don't know them all, it's just impossible. But on the other hand, think about when you're speaking. There's probably a certain amount of patterns that you're using on a daily basis, and you're just subbing in different words for the topic that you're talking about at the time. If you can start to learn common patterns in English, you're going to be able to start speaking better and have much more naturally flowing conversations in English. Start by learning some conversation patterns in English, practice using them really well, and you'll be able to steer conversations in the direction that you want them to go, which is going to make it more comfortable for you, giving you better sounding spoken English. And just like a lot of the things that we're talking about today, the more exposures you have to different types of patterns, the better and the easier it's going to be for you to speak great English. If you can pick up on patterns naturally by reading them or when you hear them, it's just going to be that much easier for you to fit into a naturally sounding conversation instead of trying to fit what you want to say into a strict set of rules and apply that when you're trying to speak. So just be on the lookout for English patterns, and I think you're really going to see the improvement in your English. Next thing you can think about is you should always review what you learn from time to time. There's never going to be a situation where you're going to just pick up everything on the first try. Like anything that you want to get better at, you just want to go ahead and go over it from time to time to keep refining it and getting better at it. You don't become good at something without lots of practice, and when you can do something without having to think about it, it's just going to be so much easier for you. Think about something that you are really good at now. How did you get better at it? Probably by going over it to reinforce it. Speaking English is no different. There are words that I know now because I can understand that base word, or I can see a pattern because I've been exposed to it so many different times. The key takeaway here is always review what you learn. The last thing we'll talk about is making mistakes. English isn't your first language, so there's no way that you can expect to be perfect at it. If you are trying to speak it, then you are going to be expected to make mistakes. And if you never make any mistakes, then you're probably not speaking at all, or you're speaking very little. You don't want to wait until you are a flawless English speaker to start speaking in English, because without making those mistakes, you're not going to know what works and what doesn't work when speaking in English. The most important thing is when you do make those mistakes is that, do you learn from them? See if you can match how you say something or the mistake that you've made to the way that other people are saying that same thing. Knowing that you are going to make a lot of mistakes and then just being okay with that is going to make you a much better English speaker in the long run. I have a friend who makes lots of mistakes when she's speaking English, but she still has lots of fun conversations because she's not afraid to just make that mistake, keep on moving on, and then fix those mistakes later. And like we talked about earlier, if you make a mistake, but that person that you're speaking to is able to understand you, that's the most important part of a conversation. Just two people understanding each other. You can learn and try not to make that same mistake for the next conversation that you're going to be in the future. Which of these have you tried before? And which of these are you guys interested in trying in the future? Also, if you had any good benefit out of this video, how about sharing it with someone else that you think it will help? And if you're interested in using YouTube to learn how to improve your English any further, how about check out this video right here that's popping up on the screen now. Thank you guys so much for watching. I look forward to seeing you in the next video. See you.